Hello and welcome back to EMPYRION Galactic Survival. My name is Spanj. With 1.5 around the corner, now is a great time to get back into EMPYRION Galactic Survival. Whether you've never played before or you stopped playing back in Alpha 8, today I'll take you through some of the key changes in the game and how to use the new tools and systems, because since Alpha 8 there have been huge changes that you might want to know about. I'm going to use Alpha 8 as the baseline for this video, and I'm going to take you through the highlights of the big changes that have happened to the game since then. Maybe you've never played before, in which case, this is also going to be useful as well, so that you can see what kind of state EMPYRION is in now. First of all, did you know that you can now repair your ships automatically? No more single block replacement from damaged vessels or anything like that. You can now repair them using a wonderful little block called the repair bay here. Here I have a hover vessel. It has taken some severe damage to the left side of it. We're going to go ahead and repair that now. So first of all, we need a base, we need a repair bay, and we need a repair console. We open up our repair console here, click repair to template, and it should tell us the resources that we need in order to repair our hover vessel here. Let's just go ahead and grab those resources, and once we got those resources, we could just drag them and drop them into this little box down here, and then once we have all the resources ready, click start repair, and that's it. The system will now put a nice magical green force field around our hover vessel, and then before you know it, your vessel will be back to normal. There are a couple of modes on the repair bay you should be aware of. Repair to template will replace missing blocks, but you'll also need to run repair blocks in order to, well, fix any of the blocks that are still there but slightly damaged. Still, that's usually just a little bit of iron, and then click the start repair, and off it goes again. So a little bit of a two-step process in repairing, but it shouldn't take too long, depending on how severe the damage is. Don't forget as well that in the control panel of whatever vessel you would like to repair, make sure you hit the Save Template button. This is down on the main tab in the control panel. If you're building something from scratch, you will definitely need to click this. If you are spawning it from the blueprint library, i.e. your F2 blueprints menu here, if you're spawning it from here, it will take one automatically for you, but any modifications you make will not be saved unless you click the Save Template button. Just bear that in mind. Also, since Alpha 8, medical stuff has taken a huge change. So it no longer is just one medical device enough to heal all of your injuries and ailments. You'll now find a plethora of different types of treatment options for a variety of different illnesses, burns, diseases, and so on and so forth. Food has also gone from a similar thing, but food is food. It does one thing, it feeds you. Medicine is a little bit more complicated. You'll notice if you hover over each type of these medicines, it will tell you what it's effective against. Now, there's 3 different groups of medical stuff, and what they've done is they've grouped the medicine into tiers. So it starts off with little gels and ointments, then it goes to pills, then it goes to injections, and then finally kits. Kits are the most powerful of the medical items. They will cure most of the ailments within their respective categories. So there's trauma, which is anything like burns, breaks, fractures, and things like that. There's decontamination, which is all things like radiation and parasites and so on and so forth. And then there's detox, which is all things like poisoning and fevers and stuff like that. The kits, like I said, are the most powerful, but they are also the hardest to make and the most expensive to get. So you'll be looking before that into injections, pills, and gels. But if we look at the gels, for example, they cure so many fewer things. So you'll want to, as you advance, just make sure that you have got a decent supply of all of the medicines before you go out to battle. For example, my broken leg here, well, fortunately that's cured nice and easily by either a bandage or a trauma kit. Trauma kit's maybe a little overpowerful for a broken leg, so we'll just go ahead and use that bandage, and away goes my broken leg, like magic. They've also gotten rid of that green barrier. Do you all remember the green and red barriers? The green barrier was the divider of the playfield, which are technically just flat squares wrapped around a sphere. And the red barriers would stop you from going into the poles. Well, the red barriers are gone. You can now actually go into the poles, although there's nothing there. The green barrier is still visible on the map itself. You can see here is this grey line going from north to south, but as you can see, there's nothing in front of me as far as the eye can see. The transition between over the green barrier, there's that little flicker, and that's it. So the green barrier's gone. Still a little flicker when you transition, but it's really not that bad, especially considering that big green barrier was so immersion breaking. But it's now gone! It's gone! While we're looking at the map, you can also see that there are different factions now, and they have territory. We can see that the Zirax here in red have lots of territory, and they're still very angry at everyone. The Talon have their own territory, and the new Polaris faction have their own territory. So if you're unfamiliar with all the factions and stuff, well, there's actually quite a few of them now, and their territory is marked out in their colors, both here and on the galaxy map. Oh yes, galaxies. Not just one solar system anymore. Entire galaxies full of solar systems. We now have 3 maps. The local one, which we're familiar with. The local star system one, which we're also familiar with. This used to be all there was. A single star with a bunch of planets around it. And now, the galaxy map. With hundreds and thousands of stars. And like I said, you can turn on territory view and you can see the galactic territories of all the different factions. And as you can see, there's a few of them. There's definitely a few of them. Oh yeah, and the Zirax, still angry at everything, will actually attack your base. They can come and attack you now. You better be ready for their defense. I've only got some troops here by the looks of it. Fortunately, they're not attacking with their drones just yet. And luckily I've got some sentry guns. Ah, they've just destroyed with me sentry guns. I'm in trouble now. My little survival tool is enough to defeat these buggers. Red laser death for the win. Ow, 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 ow. Got him. The base is safe. You can also get attacked by the Talon. If you've annoyed the Talon, they will come in droves of soldiers and warriors and even shamans that can disable your base power systems. You can see when your next base attack is due in the statistics page of your base, how much threat it is causing, the overall probability, and so on and so forth. You can now also remote access your storage using the F4 on the keyboard. I can access using the drop-down lift here, not only the base, my hover vessel and my little SV all within the drop downs. The base here itself, I can access then the different cargo boxes that I have access to. I can also just select my hover vessel over here, and let's say my hover vessel had a bunch of ore ready to deliver to the base. I don't even need to go to the cargo boxes on the respective base or hover vessel. I can just click that arrow and it moves the stuff from my hover vessel to my base, ready to be processed and turned into something useful. For an extra challenge as well, you could turn on the optional weights and volumes system. You can see the details of weights and volumes down at the bottom of these containers in the F4 logistics menu. Over here we can see that my hover vessel, the Earth Mover, has about a volume of 11,000 out of 12,000, so it's almost full. We can see that my container on my base, after I put all that iron ore in there, has a volume of 12,000 out of 16,000. Still has a bit of space in, but of course if we try and move that copper over there, it will be unable to move it all because it maxes out the volume. What volume and weights does is it limits the amount of stuff that you can carry, adds an element of realism I suppose, and of course, like I say, challenge to the logistics of the game. Now that you have to have the storage available in order to store all the stuff that you acquire. This also applies to how much a ship can lift. For example, I could probably put a bunch of this ore into Nightshade, although not a great deal of it because it's not got very big, cargo boxes. But if I load all this weight into the Nightshade here, it will affect the ship's performance. It might not even be able to lift off. It can still, but it's much slower, and performance is very much affected It's very sluggish now, as you can see. It's very much affected by the weight that I've just added to it. So you need to make sure, if you are playing with weights and volume switched on, that your vessels have got the capacity, both in storage and in lift and thrust, to take the sort of weight and volume that you're going to be putting into it. This leads to new ship designs and stuff that are specialists in lifting and carrying, things like that. So it is definitely an interesting and challenging dynamic to turn on. I can't play without it now. I think playing without it is it breaks some of the immersion, and it breaks the challenge down and makes things a little too easy. So personally, I always play now with weights and volume switched on, but I know there are plenty of you out there that did stop playing the game when this mechanic was introduced. I suggest try it. Give it a go now in 1.5 when 1.5 comes along. I think you might enjoy the challenge. You might not, but I think it's in a good place now. The balancing has been done better. It's a little bit more generous. So it might be worth coming back and giving it another go. Oh, and did I mention that we've got shields now? Shields are run and powered on pentaxid, but they will not last forever. They will protect your ship for a little while it's being shot at, but once they deplete, obviously then your ship starts taking physical damage. So it's a nice little safety precaution to make sure that in your early game ships, like the Nightshade here, that you don't take an overwhelming amount of damage on your ship just by attacking a single POI. The blue bar at the bottom of the screen there that you can see depleting as I was being shot does rapidly recharge, providing you've got the pentaxid to do so. I do still recommend, obviously, trying to dodge incoming fire and having something a little bit more powerful than just a pair of GATs when going up against something like the armory here. But as you can see, shields are around about 50% right now, and I'm still shooting. I'm not ready to retreat just yet. Now is a good time, and as the shields deplete, I start taking physical damage to the ship and losing stuff. So it's definitely time to back off now. One of the other things you might have noticed as well in the bottom right corner, my generators are over capacity. This can lead to physical damage to your generators, which means if you haven't provided enough power in your ship to run those shields, you could end up actually self-destructing your ship. Power management with shields is a must. Not only shields, but thrusters as well. Pretty much anything that takes power will put strain on those generators. If you don't have enough generators, they'll overload and they will explode. For those builders of you out there that haven't played since Alpha 8, there are a huge number of new block shapes for you to choose from and to build with, including some nice new heavy windows which look amazing, although are slightly lacking in the shapes at the moment. More shapes are coming in 1.5 though. You can now also dock SVs to HVs, or HVs to SVs, and also CVs to CVs. I've docked my SV to my HV here. I can now carry around the Nightshade on the back of the Earthmover. Not sure why I would want to do this, but it does open up the door for sort of little land carriers and things like that. Not necessarily overly practical. Probably the other way round is the better way to do it. Docking an HV to an SV does mean that you can quickly deploy a hover vessel to the other side of the map, use it, and then carry and lift it home. And that's especially useful if the terrain is very unforgiving to hover vessels. Just whip up a nice little SV, carry your hover vessel over, use it, and then carry it back again. Very nice. One of the things that probably stopped many of you from playing this game is the CPU system. Yes, it's still a thing, but it is also still turned off by default. It is an entirely optional system. I, however, have become very accustomed to it and will not play or build without it anymore. The CPU system has gone through many iterations of change, balancing, and so on and so forth. It's still not perfect, but it is a lot better than what it was when it first reared its head. Now we have, of course, the 4 tiers of CPU, and there is also an advanced core out in the vanilla game which just completely bypasses the entire thing if you can find one, and is ultimately used for those big end game CVs that we all love. The CPU system for those of you that don't know, is a limit on build size and capability. It is another challenge for builders, and it does encourage smaller, more efficient builds. Just a quick run through here with the Nightshade is it has 21,000 points of CPU allocated, but I have a tier 3 CPU extension installed which allows me up to 40,000. So in its current configuration it actually has quite a nice little bonus to its efficiency, which is why I'm able to run just about a whole shield within it with just 2 generators. Normally you would need a few more generators than that. In fact I do, because you know it overloads. But the point is, this little ship is a tier 3 and therefore can sport a shield which can protect it a little bit longer. Now with that extra points I can add more guns on that thing and make this little SV quite a little bulldog of a fighter and take on those POIs a little bit more aggressively. At the moment it's just still got the 2 GAT, so it's kind of a bit piddly and weak. Do bear in mind though that the cost of these CPU extensions is quite high. If we have a look at our tech tree here for small vessels, we can actually unlock the various extenders, and it does tell us where they can be built. So we can see that CPU tier 2s and 3s can be built in a large constructor, but the tier 4 will require an advanced constructor. Here we can also see how expensive they are. Sticking with the tier 3, the crafting recipe or the requirements are down there. You can see requires 2 small optronic bridges and 8 flux coils. In turn, those small optronic bridges cost 15 gold, 125 electronics and 80 oscillators. Not to mention the flux coils require titanium and cobalt and neodymium. There are other options, however. If you get lucky in POI, you can find these bridges and optronic things, or you can find a Polaris trader, assuming your rep is good enough, and if you've got enough credits, you can also buy them. All in all, I don't think the CPU system is an overall overly limiting thing anymore. Balancing and stuff has been done to a nice degree that still allows you to bring in some of those big ridiculous ships that we all love. For example, the Gladiator here sporting 20 artillery turrets and I've lost count of how many GATs, lasers and missile turrets is, plus also it is probably one of the most heavily armored ships to exist out there. Is tier 4. It's in CPU. It is within CPU, so you can still, with a bit of with a design flair, bring in some of the big bad ships that we all love and enjoy. The CPU just kind of makes you think a little bit more about what is really important and how much of the devices that you want to add to a ship. For example, the Gladiator here has next to no production capacity. It is all just guns and ammo boxes and combat steel blocks, and that's pretty much it. So maybe if you do want the big honking battleships, you might have to forego some production capacity in order to get it within the CPU limits. That's pretty much a whistle-stop tour of most of the biggest changes to come to the game since Alpha 8. There are, of course, a huge number of other changes that have come in that I've not covered, such as all the new POIs, new planets, bigger planets, better graphics, new lighting. I could go on. Plus a huge array of bug fixes. That being said, there are still plenty of bugs in the game. There are still plenty of mechanics that are unfinished or not even there, and plenty of things that we wished we had in Alpha 8 that we still do not have. So, but it wouldn't be EMPYRION if it wasn't imperfect, if it wasn't hard, mostly broken in some places and so on and so forth. So, that's the game. That's EMPYRION. But I definitely think with all the additions that have been made to the game, all the new stuff that has been added, that it is definitely worth another look. If you've quit playing in Alpha 8 or around that area, I think you'll be surprised at how much more alive the universe of EMPYRION actually feels. And if you've never played before, I do highly recommend this game. I bought it years ago at £15 and has given me thousands of hours of entertainment and challenge, not only in just playing the game, but building as well. But ultimately, it's not for everyone. Hopefully, I've given you a little bit of an idea of what to expect when you come back in for 1.5. However, this doesn't include the changes that are coming in 1.5, which will be more. I'll do another video on that. don't worry. I do want to quickly cover some other things. If you are looking to come back into the game or start a new game, then I just want to cover off some of the things that aren't really explained. When you start a new game, a lot of the sort of options and stuff are not really explained and not made very clear. This screen here, for example, it gives you the start button straight away. You can bypass, without even realizing, half of the options that you can change when you start a new game. The game name and seed, not so important. The seed is just how it generates the world. But if you click on difficulty settings here, you get a whole host of extra options that determine how your game actually plays, from the starting equipment down to whether CPU points are even applied. Now, the starting equipment is what you start with. Generally, I will leave this all as medium. However, as you can see, I have customized some things. Keep on inventory def, just the toolbar items. It's a nice convenience. You can set it to nothing, and then if you die, you respawn with nothing. However, having just your toolbar items, the stuff that was in your hand, can be a little bit of a lifesaver. Player progression, normal. That's kind of how quickly you gain levels and XP. Degradation speed is how quickly things wear out. I generally set that to slow because it's annoying. Food consumption, oxygen consumption, temperature, radiation impact. Generally need those as normal unless you don't want to be bothered too much about these things. You can set them to slow. Resources is an interesting one, and this will depend on your particular playstyle. I, for example, don't like mining very much, so I generally set my amount of ore to rich, but the number of deposits to few. This means that I have to visit fewer deposits and then get more for my trouble. But obviously then there's fewer deposits, so it kind of balances it out. Auto miner depletion, I generally also set to false, so that auto miners can be a nice constant source of those resources, and you're not having to constantly go out and get more and more and more, doing more and more mining. Auto miners do it for you, you just have to collect and fuel them. Enemy difficulty, I generally always set to hard, and as well as drone presence and the base attacks. This makes things a little bit more exciting, although admittedly somewhat more bullet spongy over, decent AI. Construction, I generally set to fast, because waiting for a constructor to do something is boring. Blueprint and repair speed, the same. Blueprint spawn limit, this limits where you can spawn things. If you hover over, enable disables whether blueprints must be placed on a base or a CV when spawned. It was kind of a half-implemented mechanic towards restricting the factory. In fairness, it's just a pain, and it just forces you to build platforms everywhere that is just unnecessary. It doesn't really add anything to the game at the moment, so generally set it as false. Block limit for certain devices. If you want to be limited on how many weapons you can put on a ship, then set that to true. Otherwise, false. Check mass and volume. This is the weights and volumes that I was talking about earlier. Generally, I always play with it on now, as well as CPU points on. By default, these two are switched off. Going back, we can also set our planet size to medium, large, or whatever, and our start location, we now have a choice of 4 start locations, by the way. Some of you guys coming from Alpha 8 might only be familiar with the temperate and the desert planets, formerly known as Kura and Omicron. Now we have temperate, desert, swamp, and snow. Both all is labeled as easy, which is a complete lie. Okay, the temperate one is easy, the arid one is medium, the swamp is hard, as is the snow. Okay, that's rubbish. Anyway, so that's your starting options. Okay, now there are a few more things I just want to cover with you when you actually start the game. Again, these are things that are not really explained very well. We're all familiar, of course, with descending towards the planet in our escape pod. That's pretty much the same. You can also get an internal view on your escape pod by pressing V, which is nice. It will look around as you have no control over the ground below. Once you crash land, you'll get the IDA system picking up, and this is the whole new PDA mission system. Generally, I'd recommend if this is your first time, you proceed with that, and you go through the missions and the tutorial as it explains it to you. For you veteran players out there, though, you can abort it. It will give you a nice little warning, and things might not work or progress in the normal way that the game is expecting it to. First of all, though, you should check out your new inventory items. For those of you back from Alpha 8, the survival tool is a new addition, as is the portable heater and cooler, and we've already covered the medicines. Inside your escape pod, for some bizarre reason, is a snowman head and a Santa Claus hat. Ignore these, take everything else, however. One of the things that you're going to want straight away is this little thing called a detector. This works like a gun. So you put it on your toolbar and you will fire it like a gun. Creates a lovely little ping noise and a little blue ping goes around. And as you can see, it reveals nearby points of interest, including resources. So no longer are you scrambling around at the start of the game trying to find where everything is. The detector gives you a bearing immediately, as well as giving you, up in the top right corner, red highlights for which direction things can be found in. That's useful for on the run glance, which direction do I go into. I generally use the minimap feature if I'm trying to find stuff in an SV. It'll highlight red, I generally fly in that direction, and then ping the detector to see if I can get some more information up. The survival tool has multiple modes. If you right click, you get those different modes come up: defense, resource, and salvage. The one that you're going to be using the most is probably the resource mode. This works just like a drill, and you can dig the ground. It is quite slow because, well, it's just the survival tool, but as you can see, it does make a sizable hole in the ground. Defense is, well, you saw it earlier, it's the red lasers of death. They take a long time to kill anything, but eventually they will kill something. And salvage mode is, well, obviously it's salvage stuff. Again, it works a bit like the multi-tool. You can rip things apart, but because it's a survival tool, it takes forever to do it. Whoops. Oh yeah, and things collapse now. But you can pick them up and get all the resources for it. Or most of them, not all. It's actually a very, very cut down amount of resources. But I just got 375 steel plates for that. That was fun. Oh, and yeah, don't be worried about these guys. They get a bad rep because, you know, they're all claws and teeth. But the pangolins are pretty friendly, as long as you don't attack them. You can tell what's friendly generally by the colour. If they're sort of cyan colour like this guy, they're passive. If they're a yellow colour, I've got no examples around me right now, but if they're yellow, they're predators and they will attack you. The other things you may not be familiar with if you're coming back from Alpha 8 is the ore scanner, which is used for some of the more advanced ores like Promethean. You'll need to have that in your inventory in order to see them. The survival tent, if you're playing in single player, allows you to sleep through the night. It's like a little time machine. It's amazing. And like we said, the heater and cooler earlier, this thing is, well, if you're on a snowy planet or a hot planet, this thing will neutralize the temperature immediately around it and allow you to some extent survive more extreme conditions. If I take that away, for example, the temperature you can see in the top right is 22 degrees. Place it down, it goes up to 25 degrees. As the name suggests, it's a nice heater cooler system. Very, very useful in dangerous climates and can be an absolute lifesaver. So that's pretty much it. Everything else is pretty much the same as you maybe found it in Alpha 8 or even earlier. Oh yeah. I'm full. All those damn steel plates. I can no longer pick stuff up. Well, some things never change, and I can always use the factory to just dump resources in. Yippee! Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you found this useful. And if you are considering coming back to EMPYRION, do let me know down below. Maybe you've never played before, or maybe you got so annoyed with the game back in Alpha 8 or whatever that you haven't played since. In any case, I want to hear from you. Let me know what you think. I hope you enjoyed the video, found it useful. Also, you guys out there still playing, the veterans of the game, if I missed anything, if I didn't cover anything that was important, or that you think is a nice addition that I missed out, let me know in the comments. Let everybody know. Thank you very much for watching, and hopefully I'll see you next time. Until then, take care. Bye-bye.